Good afternoon, everyone. Just in case you were thinking you were coming here to get a load of answers, you'll see from my presentation that what I'm going to do largely is ask questions. But hopefully they will lead us to answers as we go through this session. What are the big challenges? Sarah's alluded to some of those. I just wanted to be a little bit more focused on those. UK population to increase by 3.6 million in the next 10 years. A lot of that in the southeast of England and the London area. We need 250,000 more homes a year to be built. There's going to be a 10% to 30% decrease in deployable water resource by 2050 due to climate change. 35% more properties at risk of flooding by 2080 due to climate change. And just in case we're looking forward to nice hot summers, yeah, they're going to come. At least a 5 degrees centigrade rise in summer temperatures by 2070. That sort of rise will have a big impact on human health. We'll talk about that in a minute. So let's look at the water challenge. Now I'm quoting here from some recent publication on research which was undertaken between Oxford University and CEH, Centre for Hydrology at Wallingford, and they have come up with some very interesting conclusions. They've looked at all the possible ways we might meet the water challenge. Water saving devices in the home and in business. They've looked at how we might increase the supply of water through gathering more abstractions together. Could we transfer water? To what extent can we transfer water between areas of the UK where we have plenty of water and areas where it's scarce? And what about leakage? High leakage rates. If we fix the leakage, add all of that together and we still fall short. We cannot meet the future requirements by doing all of that stuff. Even if we were successful, we still fall short. We need to create a local additional water resource. And there are two ways we can do that. We can do it by grey water recycling within premises or within communities, or we could do it perhaps a little more easily by rainwater harvesting. And I've tended to focus on that, and there's some questions around that. But some key questions. How would we make rainwater harvesting a reality? How can we really deliver that? And what are the incentives, the carrots and the sticks that might help that happen? Flooding. Interesting questions. We're still building in flood risk areas. We don't use sustainable drainage systems universally. We're still struggling in England, though we're doing better in Wales and Scotland, but we're still struggling in England to get SUDs adopted as part of the drainage systems that we put in place. And the buildings that we are still building are enormously vulnerable to floodwater. They're almost zero resilient. They don't have to be. We know how to do it better, but we're not doing that. So how do we make our buildings more resilient to flooding? How do we make sustainable drainage systems the default option? And the other question is, if we are going to start introducing storage within sustainable drainage systems to reduce flooding, couldn't we use that water, like rainwater harvesting, as a water resource? Could we be really clever and have tanks, and you've seen plenty of examples around here, that we install on new developments, which could store water when we needed it to store it for use as a resource, but then emptied themselves out before a storm, when the newer storm was coming, and then they could be used to store some of the rainwater and reduce the flood risk downstream. It's already possible. We have the technology to do that. We just need to get on and do it. Temperature. Now, 5 degrees centigrade doesn't seem like a big rise in temperature. But we know from other parts of the world where this is already becoming a very serious problem. The climate change impacts on temperature rise in Chicago is a real public health issue. So what are we going to do? Are we going to put air conditioning in all of our buildings? Are we actually going to have to run for cover when we're out walking into the nearest bank that has an efficient air conditioning system? I'm just thinking my experience of walking around Singapore. That's what I do in the daytime because I'm not used to the temperatures there. Or do we put more vegetation and water into the landscape? Do we use the natural cooling of vegetation and then gain all the other benefits that go with that? Why do we bury surface water? And the illustration I've used here is from a redevelopment of an urban area in Malmö in Sweden, where instead of burying all the rainwater runoff from the roofs and all the rainwater that comes off the roads and pathways underground in pipes, they kept it all on the surface. And having got it all on the surface, they then integrated that within the urban design. And this was a retrofit to an existing area. So all the surface water there is on the surface. Why do we insist in burying it all the time? We can make it an amenity and we can get the cooling effect from it as well. And Anna's going to say more about that in her presentation in a few moments. And how do we... Okay, so I've said a bit. And so just to summarise, because I only have a few minutes, and I know that Sarah's keeping an eye on the clock here, let's just go back through those questions again, and I'll leave you with a few figures to finish with. This illustration is from Copenhagen, centre of Copenhagen, near the Copenhagen Business School. Nice example of a modern landscape with surface water on the surface. So all of these questions, what would it take to make rainwater harvesting a reality? How do we make SUDs the default options? Could we use smart SUDs to harvest rainwater as well? What would it take to make our buildings more flood resilient? And can we improve development to drive blue-green concepts into all new developments? Let's just see it as the default standard. 80,000 new rainwater harvesting systems are installed in Germany every year. Almost no local lead flood authorities feel that SUDS is generally well integrated within the design of new developments. That's from a Landscape Institute recent publication from a survey of local lead flood authorities. In other words, there's a disconnect between managing water in the environment and the planning process. And if you're not sure whether or not we're going to make progress in making our buildings more resilient to flooding, let me tell you, if we do not do that, once flood ray finishes in about 20 years' time, we will not be able to get affordable insurance on those properties that are at significant risk of flooding. So that's an absolute given. Insurance and the insurance sector are already driving that now. And the key question is, how do we convince the public? How do we get them on board? Some of these measures will cost. I am not going to pretend to developers that this can all be done at current cost. It can't. Some of these things will cost us more, but they will deliver resilience, sustainability and value in the longer term. And we have to get the public on board and be honest about that. So we have to ask the question, will the public be prepared to pay? Thank you.